I'm asking this question right now because as a college student, I am just fed up with the almost self-harming atmosphere around here right now. Now, this is going to be kind of a stream of consciousness video, so I'm not going to have any research or data to show you. Anyway, the question is stressing kids out a form of child abuse? Now, obviously, the answer depends on circumstances, but usually no, right? Well, consider the following story. Imagine there's a parent who wants his child to do really well on tests at school. This parent is so intent on his child doing well that he tells the child, "If you score below 70%, I'm going to punch you in the stomach." Is this a form of child abuse? Well, it obviously is. There's little debate about that. And fortunately, very few parents actually beat their students, but sadly I bet there are a few out there. Now, imagine the parents aren't so cruel to their children, but the children still have to take tests and still fear for the grades and hope they get A's. Just like our world today. Imagine the teacher gives their students a peculiar offer. The teacher tells the students, "If you agree, I'll punch you in the stomach, but you'll get an A in the class and won't even have to take the test." Clearly, this is a messed up teacher. But how many students do you think would take the offer? Based on what I've seen in my high school and college experiences, I would say a good chunk of them, maybe like 25%. You might think that's a crazy claim, but just remember all the students who have literal panic attacks before an important test, or the students who are willing to sacrifice their health by spending multiple all-nighters in a row just preparing for the big test, or even the students who contemplate or commit suicide because they just can't handle all the stress these educational assessments give them. Can you just imagine how much relief it would be to those students? For all those months of anxious preparation, memorization of dates, all these tips and tricks you have to remember for how to prepare the best for this test. All gone. It's just all those fears just gone. And in exchange, you just get a punch to the stomach? I mean, the punch lasts a second, and the pain and bruises maybe a week or so if the punch is really bad. But compared to the gut-wrenching, hair-pulling anxiety that some students really feel and fear, it might just be worth it. I don't really think it's that crazy. So if there's even just one student out there who's willing to take that punch over the test, that means that for that one student, the test is worse than literal physical abuse. Which means that anxiety must be some form of abuse, right? I mean, as another bonus, when you get punched, you don't have to worry about your own performance, you just kind of sit back and let it happen. Whereas on an academic test, it is all about how you perform. That is why there's so much stress and fear involved. This all sounds really extreme, I know, but speaking from personal experience, while I never feared grades as much as some other classmates did, one thing I did fear as a small child was piano recitals, because when I was little, I had crippling stage fright. I was super shy. So much so that I couldn't even stand up in front of a class of 20 kids without holding the railing behind me. Anyway, in the days leading up to a piano recital, I would count down the hours left I had to go before death. I would secretly wish for an earthquake to happen right before the recital to destroy the building, or somehow just make it reasonable for me not to go anymore. Or I even contemplated how I could incur an injury serious enough for me to not do the recital, and I knew it would be painful, but pain is only temporary, but embarrassment over recital was gonna last forever. If I told my parents this now, they'd probably say, "What? You never told us this. You always seemed so happy. We thought you liked it." And that's probably fair. I don't think I ever actually asked if I could just not do it. But to me, barring disasters, I kind of saw those recitals as inevitable. I thought they were forced on me because I just, as a human, had to suffer. So of course I'd take the punch if I could. I mean, the gut-wrenching fear that I felt kind of felt like a punch anyway. I ended up doing the recital anyway, and I guess I was proud of it, but I still don't know if it was really worth it. But the moment after performing at the recital is just pure bliss, because all my worries in some form or another seem to trace themselves back to this one performance, so that when that performance was lifted off my shoulders, I was just so free. It felt like my life was finally in my own hands. And similarly, students who are tearing themselves up over a really big test that's coming up probably also feel like it's inevitable and there's no escape, just like I did. And I mean, I guess I haven't really found a way out of that either, because I'm still in college and I'm still taking tests and all that. But I guess I just stopped caring lately. I mean, that's such a pretentious thing to say, right? Ooh, I don't care about grades anymore. But Like, I used to feel like my self-value was lowered when I saw a B instead of an A for my history class. And like now I don't really care. Like, it doesn't matter at all to me if it's an A or a B or a C, which might make me sound lazy, but I just, I want to feel like I'm still me regardless of what happens. Like, no part of me will be removed because I see a lower percentage on that, transcript. I'll still have all the achievements I actually care about and enjoy doing, and so I'm still Carrie Huang. But even after saying this, you still have some hidden fears inside of you when the release of their cause, as in school ending in the summer, feels more liberating than you expected it to be. Especially when you think that you've outgrown the childish need for it to just be summer again. Now, I know you guys already have objections, and rightly so. First, oh my god, you are condoning child abuse of actually punching kids? And no, this is just a thought experiment. I do not in any way think that this should actually be performed, obviously. The second thing is, the true students out there would never take this punch. They're just there to learn, so they would take the test. And if they prepared like true students should, they shouldn't be under any stress. And yeah, those students totally exist. In fact, they might be the majority of students out there. But just because one student doesn't feel unbearable anxiety doesn't mean all students don't feel that. One man's trash is another man's treasure, and one student's pleasure is another student's pain. I don't know, okay? But you get the point. Even if there's just one student out there who's on the brink of collapse, that may be a problem. Third, it's good for students to suffer a little stress in education. It better prepares them for real stressful situations in the real world. After all, enduring struggles is just a part of growing up. It makes you an adult. It builds character. I mean, I can see what you mean, but I really hate the toughen you up argument. Because the whole point of advancing technology is to make human lives easier and more enjoyable for both you in the future and your future posterity. In fact, that might be the whole point of humanity entirely, is just to make life better for future humans. I don't think it's shameful, or even lazy, to try to find the shortcuts, be efficient, or avoid hardships, if possible, if you get the same final result. It's not shameful or lazy to develop a new technology that lets people do something like eat food without gaining weight. That's just an example. I mean, that's just humans doing what humans do best, better than all other creatures on Earth, which is gradually improving the well-being of all other humans. Work smarter, not harder. Doing better as a species on this planet is like one giant game. And if you can find the move that puts you in a straight path towards victory, then you've won the game. You haven't cheated as long as you've played the rules of the game. But the point is, we want to find those easy solutions. I mean, you already know this, and everyone already knows this, because we've been through revolutions before. 500 years ago, 90% of the population was farmers. And I bet they'd all tell you that to become a respectable adult and grow up, you needed to have scars on your hands from working on the fields for days, because, adults are supposed to work. And now we no longer think that. We no longer think that physical stress and pain is required to grow up. Or else we'd all be considered lazy, which we're not. I think enduring mental stress and pain is the equivalent of 500 years ago's enduring physical stress and pain. You do it to have a stable occupation in life, but if you don't do it and still manage to get along, you're seen as a lazy burden on humanity. So imagine there was this device that you could use to record exactly how well a student knew material. Teachers could use this instead of taking tests, right? It would replace the test-taking process. Obviously, this device won't be invented for a long time, but if it did get invented, I'm almost certain that some people out there would say, we still need to push students through the test-taking course so that they learn how to deal with stress, so that they're better prepared for real stressful situations later in life. But do we need to do this? I mean, we don't physically harm people's bodies so that they get better at healing in the future. If we were to scar our hands over and over again, eventually we'd get calluses and we'd be able to, hold things better. But, as a result of us not doing that, sure, we're worse at holding things that are heavy. But it's just not worth 18 years of injuring your hands. And is it worth it to go through 18 years or 22 years, I don't know, of the analogous mental strain just to be slightly more prepared for later life stress? I mean, a handful of us will always go to really stressful and really necessary jobs, but I can kind of imagine like 90% of us ending up in pretty stable jobs, and like even if they're unemployed, it's still not going to be as stressful as perhaps the big tests are hyped up to be. And it seems like with all the adults who claim to have dreams where they missed a class, or they forgot to turn in an assignment, or they're failing a test, that school is actually adding on more stress in later life than it is relieving people of it. But that brings me to the fourth and possibly most obvious logical argument against this, which is we need the students to learn the material that we're going to teach them. They have to be able to tackle the world's problems, and they can only do that if we make sure they learn everything we want them to learn. I mean, sometimes people just have to deal with stress, and that's just one consequence of educating our students. So the benefit of being better prepared to operate in this world is so much more worth it than just worrying about this stress. This point almost makes sense to me. It almost makes sense until I remember that these students around me, a lot of them cram in the 24 hours before a test, take the test, and will forget it in the next 3 days. They're not going to remember any of this material in the next 3 days, let alone the next 3 years. And I don't blame them, because there's no more incentive. In high school, I had this bad habit of never studying for tests, but it was okay because I mostly got A's. So I joke with other classmates that the reason I wasn't studying because I claimed studying is cheating. And like everyone would know I was joking, because how can the two be the same? They are literally the epitome of being a good student and the epitome of being a bad student. I was kind of joking, but not really, because there is a way in which I think studying is cheating. You take this test so that you can get this grade in this class that will end up on the transcript to show other people how well you know this material. Employers might see that you have an A- in like a high school economics class and say, whoa, that kid is really good with economics. So in essence, this test ideally shows other people how qualified present to future you are in a specific subject. Ideally, if you took this test 5 years later as an employee, you'd still do just as well because the employers employed you because they thought you were good at it. Also, like, once you get credits for a class, you get those credits forever. They don't wear away. That would be dumb. So if the test is eventually supposed to measure how skilled you'll be in the profession that the employer is going to employ you in, then the graph should look something like this, where your skills, I should have labeled that skills. Over the course of the class, they go up to whatever, B+, and then when they employ you, they see that B+, and expect B+ skills out of you. Because this is what they really care about, how much you'll be able to benefit the company with your B+ skills. Obviously, if you have A skills, you're more preferable, and you have F skills, you're not preferable. But when you cram for a test in the previous 48 hours and then proceed to forget everything from that test, what are you doing? Well, you're more doing this, where there's just a very sharp spike right before the test occurs, and you get an A+ because you're really good at cramming, but then it just falls back down to what it was before. Maybe it would be a little higher. I should have drawn it a little higher because you might remember something. But the point is, the employers from the job time will see that A+ score and expect A+ skill level because that's what they want to use, and instead they'll get D- level skills. I mean, this is all like generalized, but the point is, you're kind of cheating the system by telling the employers, hey, look, I will give you A+ talent that you can use in your company or whatever, and you'll end up delivering much less because you forgot it all. It definitely just seems like, the test is supposed to see how good are you in general as a person at this material. And on average, like, you're pretty low, but the spike is just out of nowhere, and suddenly you artificially inflated your skill level up to an A+. It's not really you because it didn't retain with you. I mean, I'm making this sound way more heinous than it really is, right? These studyaholic students don't really have malicious intent. They're not trying to trick employers, are they? Well, I mean, I don't really know, because just talking with the classmates around here, some of the things I've witnessed are, well, obviously people pulling multiple all-nighters in a row to study for these. That's not really that extreme. But like, they'll take caffeine pills to stay awake and alert, not drinking coffee because that's too slow and isn't strong enough. Or they'll take Adderall or other drugs to calm them down so they can focus better during the actual test. Does this remind you of something? Because it reminds me of something. Doping in athletics. They're artificially boosting their mental capacity for a few hours just to show that they are a machine who can pump out calculus better than anyone else. When they're actually put up to the job of actually using calculus in the real world or whatever, they're not going to be on Adderall. They're not going to have all these energy drinks. They're going to perform much worse. So clearly the assessment didn't actually assess their true skill level on a level playing field with everyone else. They pushed it up. It's just like doping. Now, I'm not really opposed to this because I'm not anti-drug or anti-do whatever. You can just do whatever you want. But the point is, I don't really think these tests are necessarily making students better prepared for the future. Students will find ways to game the system just to get those delicious grade points they need. And if we really wanted to prepare students for whatever they're going to do in their future years, these tests are so far from the actual situations they're going to be in. It's just ridiculous. This is not real preparation. And I know what you're saying next. How can students be expected to memorize so much material at a robotic-like level? They're going to forget stuff. They're just human. I mean, after all, when students go into their actual jobs, they don't need to know all the super fine details that they learned in class. They only need to know the basics, right? The classes might overteach the material so that when they forget some, they still retain that fundamental layer. But I say, if it's okay to forget the details, why learn the details in the first place? If it's really only crucial to have that layer of fundamentals, the basics, why not drill those in so hard that you never forget them? Because if you are focusing more on the details, then there is a better chance that the fundamentals will start to crack and get forgotten. It's just hard for me to wrap my head around an occupation where every single fact, every single idea learned in all the classes of that student's educational career came into use. I mean, along those 20 years or so, somewhere along the way, there must have been some material that was just useless for the rest of his life. Okay, I get it. Most of that useless information is there to enrich you, and I totally agree. I mean, I don't want to live in a completely pragmatic universe where I only learn things because I absolutely need to. I mean, if you've been on my channel long enough, you know that I just love going on diversions and the evolution simulator, that was just for fun. It wasn't for a class. And nothing on this channel is for a class. That's why it's so awesome. But yeah, people will say most of this useless information is to enrich you, to make you a more well-rounded, civilized person who can operate in our society. But when I look around campus and I see people passing out in lecture halls because they haven't slept in 48 hours to study for a test, or I hear literal screams at midnight during finals week because all those poor students needed to relieve their stress, and I have actual video footage of screams every midnight for the whole week. Or I see people writing on their doors, "It's week X. There's no turning back now," where X is some number between 3 and 10, because where I'm attending right now, all courses are 10 weeks long. I just think, are these students really being enriched? Or is this place being turned into a zombie post-apocalypse? Let me remind you, screams through the walls. I'm trying to sleep here. Some people tell me that they put themselves through hell for 3 days so that they can do really well on their tests and feel awesome afterwards. It's delayed gratification, you know? But why divvy up your life into predetermined periods of misery and happiness? Every chunk of life is equal to every other chunk of life, and you're only going to get to live each one once. So why can't all those chunks be happy chunks? I mean, everyone always complains when it's Monday, and there are sayings like, "Thank God it's Friday," but I just think the universe doesn't give a damn what day of the week it is. It's human-imposed misery on other humans. A Monday, according to the laws of physics, are the same as every other day. So if you just want to live your life and do what you love doing, it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want on a Monday, and you can do whatever you want on a Friday. Because these classes, these letter grades, sure, they might have some impact, but they're kind of arbitrary. I mean, in the respect that afterwards, regardless of what happens, you're still you. You are still you. Globs of flesh are not going to be falling off of your face or your body just because you got an F, right? Regardless, even if you have a 0.0 GPA, you're still you. There's nothing sacred about an A, and there's nothing heinous about an F. I keep feeling like teachers will use this threat of losing points like a shot collar to keep students in check. And I'm like, what is a point even? Can I hold a point in my hands? I don't think so. The vast majority of other people on Earth aren't going to even see your transcript, let alone care. Oh, your grades affect the job you get, so they're important? Well, your life is split up into 80 or so year-long chunks. Are you really going to turn 8 to 12 of those years into absolute misery? Scream-inducing misery, remember, just so you can earn slightly more money in the remaining 40 or 50 years? Because those 8 to 12 years are worth just as much as the remaining ones. And in fact, they might be worth more because you still have the vitality, creativity, and the physical health that comes most easily to young people. So you really want to make those years worth it. So I guess I'd just like to say, children and teenagers currently in school, don't torture yourself over this stuff. It's important, but live your life. Okay, this video is getting long, so I guess I'll just say one more thing. Humans 20,000 years ago probably got really nervous if they started to run out of food, and rightfully so, because if they didn't, they'd die. Luckily, the agricultural revolution was the first steps towards fixing that. And then, 1,000 years ago, humans would get really nervous if they didn't have any clean water to drink, because, rightfully so, because if they didn't, they'd die. But modern plumbing fixed that for us. And then 500 years ago, humans might get really nervous if smallpox was starting to spread through the community or other diseases. And rightfully so, because their relatives and themselves might die. And yes, people still die from diseases now. But again, if you live in a developed country and you're well off, which you probably are if you are stressing out over college grades, then these diseases can almost always be handled pretty well by hospitals and stuff. So anyway, the point is the chance of actual physical discomfort in your life is pretty low because, as humans do, we've solved these problems gradually over the years. These innovations have made it so that not all humans have to worry about these basic problems, and most of us can now freely focus our lives on our passions without having to worry about that stuff. Yeah, there's a long way to go, but for the most part, you're free now. So you just have so much freedom that you can invest in whatever you have a passion in. And what did we end up deciding to do with this freedom? Stress out and panic over a man-made fear that humans placed on other humans. Grades. Anyway, I've probably gone way off the deep end by this point, so I guess this is it for this video. To TWOW people, TWOW 20A is probably coming out tomorrow or the day after. Bye.